David, sorry to interrupt, but you're muted. Sorry.
Thank you, Paul. I'll try again. Good evening and welcome to the British Association of Local History and the Historic Towns Trust meeting. We are holding a number of seminars being presented by people who have been involved with the Historic Towns Trust. Before I hand over to Sarah Rees-Jones from the Trust, just a couple of things about Zoom. First of all, this is a Zoom webinar, and so everyone is muted and you can't see yourself on screen. The second thing is that if you have any sort of technical problems, please pop something in the chat. The chat you'll find on the very bottom of your screen, and we will try and sort that out for you. And then if you have questions while Mick is talking, if you could use the Q&A function, that's the most helpful thing to do. And that's also on the bottom of the screen near the chat button. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Sarah Rees-Jones. Sarah Rees-Jones is a trustee of the Historic Towns Trust and Professor Emeritus at the University of York and studied medieval history and is continuing to do so. So over to you, Sarah.
David, thank you very much indeed. And good evening, everybody. It's nice to be back. On the UK Historic Towns Trust, I suspect that most of you need very little introduction to our work now. We work with local communities to create beautiful historical maps showing the development of their towns and cities. And if you head over to our website, and my assistant Hayley is going to put the link in the chat, of course, you'll be able to find out all about what we do. And please go to our shop and buy lots of maps. Included in the maps for sale, I'm very pleased to say, is our most recent new publication, the map of the city of Ripon. And it's my very great pleasure to introduce the man who has magnificently led and steered that project to completion, Mick Stanley. By training, I understand Mick was a geologist. You will see this influence in the map. Through his career, he became a museum curator, and by inclination and hobby, he is a historian. He is also the 3 times elected Right Worshipful Mayor of the city of Ripon. And it is with very great pleasure that I hand over to Mick for what I know will be a very fascinating talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. It's been a pleasure to be invited to talk to you this evening, and I'm going to get on as soon as I possibly can by pressing the share button. Going into my chat. Right. So, Ripon, Cathedral City and Market Town. I've been a resident of Ripon since 2000. And interestingly, the first person we met when visiting the city to see if we wanted to live there was the then mayor of Ripon, Alan Skidmore, who sadly died 2 years ago. But he told us when we were there that it was a city of opportunity, and how right it was. I became a councillor in 2003, and I was elected mayor first time in 2011. A very great honour for a non-Yorkshireman, although I've been living in Yorkshire for 40 years, so I'm almost an honorary Yorkshireman, I think. Right. This view is very similar to the view you've just shown you previously. This is J.M.W. Turner's drawing of Kergate with the magnificent west front of Ripon Minster as it was then in 1797. The Minster changed to a cathedral in 1836 when Ripon became a city. The great interest here is the buildings on the right, the classical building and immediately on the right, and then the jetty building further to the east. And on the left-hand side, in the distance below the west front, is the West Gate, the only known illustration that we have of the West Gate, one of 3 gates that were on the precinct of the churchyard of the Minster. West Gate, South Gate and East Gate. And just this side of the West Gate, you can see a building that sticks out into the road. That is almost certainly the gateway to the Archbishop's Manor, and you've got the details on the bottom of this slide. If I go on to the next one, this is what that area looks like today. The building on the left and immediately to the left of the entrance to the Archbishop's Manor House is now Mario's Italian restaurant, where you get a very good meal. Is one of 7 restaurants on Kirkgate. I think there are 3 Italians, one British, one Mediterranean, 1 English, 1 Spanish in a tapas bar, and now we have a sushi bar as well. So it's a very good place to eat, is Kirkgate in Ripon. I'm now going to show you an extract from the map, the historic map of Ripon that has just been referred to by Sarah. And you can see the 2 gates, the West Gate at the bottom of the map, and the West Gate, the gate to the Archbishop of York's Manor House, or palace as it's referred to on this screen, immediately at the end of Kirkgate there. The map I'm showing you now is Geoffrey's map of 1771 that effectively shows all the medieval roads that are still in existence. And at the top of the map, you've got the River Ure and the famous North Bridge. And then further south of that, you've got the St. Mary Magdalene's Chapel and Hospital, running down Stonebridge Gate towards All Hallow Gate. And at the corner of All Hallow Gate there, you've got the sorry, I've lost my thread. This map you're seeing now is a map of the 1850s county series, and it shows Ripon in context with the area around it. So to the southeast, you've got Newby Hall. To the southwest is Fountains Abbey. To the north, you've got Hutton Conyers, and to the northwest, you go up to Growthorpe, Matham, and the River Ure at the gorge. It puts the Ripon into context. The red line around the map is showing you the area of what's known as the Ripon Liberty, which was an area of land gifted to Earta of Melrose Abbey to create a monastery in Ripon, always known as the Scots Monastery. We think we know where it was, but there are no visible building sign of it at all. There's no stonework. Although I've got comments made over the years about stone figures being found in the hall of the then Ripon Community building that was torn down to create new housing, but no physical remains of the buildings of the Scots Monastery at all. So there is the said historical map of Ripon, and Ripon is the place to live, work and enjoy. And I say that, not just me, it's been voted in the top 10 places to live in Yorkshire in the Sunday Times. So what more could you want to know to come and live in Ripon? I should go through some background now of what we did to create this map. We worked with the Historic Towns Trust, as Sarah has just mentioned. So how did it start? Well, Historic Towns Trust contacted myself and Malcolm Hanson, who was looking after the guides in the cathedral, asked if we were interested in producing a map of an atlas of Ripon. We immediately said yes. And I recruited David Wimperney, a local author, and the others that listed there: Guy Wilson for crafts, Peter Hills for railways, Jane First on the military side, Clayton on industries, Mark Newman for Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal, Jonathan Clark for the cathedral archaeology, Joyce Wormsley for Mills, and Sarah Rees-Jones and Ailsa Mainman for medieval history and Anglo-Saxon history, as we hadn't got any local medievalists or Anglo-Saxonists living in Ripon or the area. Giles Darks, the cartographer, said, always judge a map by its cover. And so how right he is, because the Ripon map has sold well, not only because it's got a lot of useful information and maps in it, but also because it looks nice. It looks purchasable. And as an ex-rep before I started working in museums, I agree you always judge a map by its cover. It's available at £11.99 from the Little Ripon Bookshop, from Ripon Cathedral, Ripon Library, Grantley Hall, and other outlets, HTT link you'll see, and also I know it's available on Amazon. Thank you for the LNER post of 1930, available from the National Railway Museum. So how did we go about producing this map? Well, we followed Sarah's previous plan that she used in the York map that was produced a number of years ago. And we listed all the things, all the buildings that we could remember, we knew about, or somebody had mentioned. And there's the list. You can see the extant buildings are in red. The extinct but known locations are in orange, and the extinct but not known locations in green. You'll see that we do pretty well for the medieval and later religious buildings in knowing where they are. What I do have to bring to your attention is the fact that we had 3 bridge chapels: St. Citha for North Bridge, St. Mary for Bishopton Bridge, and St. Anthony for Hewick Bridge. We only know that they existed by reference. There's no physical archaeological evidence of where they actually were on Hewick Bridge, Bishopton Bridge, or North Bridge. And you'll see down at number 19, All Hallows Church, and the note that All Hallowgate Hill, west end of All Hallowgate. Well, we've gone through all the records, the archaeological records, the local history records, and we can find no evidence that there was a church on All Hallows. Looking in some detail, we use a whole series of different maps that are available. This one gives some information about All Hallows. We know it was part of a monastic burial ground north of the Minster. And I think that Leyland, who described the hill like a keep of a castle, is probably referring to the mound that was All Hallows Hill in his day. And I think that mound, probably he was referring to a Moulton Bailey castle rather than a keep as such. This is a view from the top of Priest Lane, looking up All Hallowgate, and you can see how steep it is. And the hill is up on the left-hand side from the traffic lights. up to the houses in the distance. The building immediately to the left of the traffic light and in front of the one that's showing red is one of the many pubs in Ripon that was changed to a private dwelling. This is the Fleece Inn that appears on the early maps. The first geological reference, and this is interesting because it's showing the geological superficial formations. So in blue at the top is the Vale of York formation, that's clays and sands and gravels. The pink is fluvio-glacial river terraces, or fluvio-glacial terraces, I beg your pardon. The brown on the bottom left-hand corner is a river terrace, and the yellow at the bottom is alluvium, that's modern material. I say modern material in the last 10,000 years, when I mean modern. And the quite striking boundary between the pink and the yellow along the southern half of this geological map is where the river cliff of the Skell, you can see at the bottom of the screen is the Skell is just part of a snake going across the bottom of the map there, and it's the Skell in its heady days when it was really a glacial overflow channel from the glaciers that were in the to the west and north of Ripon. Vast amounts of water came down and created a gorge, which I'll show you in a minute or two. And it sculpted the edge of the fluvio-glacial material there. And all these roads going off it, so you can see the road going off from the traffic island up towards, that's Bedern Bank, up towards the Minster. And you go along the yellow road skirting across the alluvium. You go up to Duck Hill, which is off Kergate, another steep hill. You go further west, you go up High Skelgate. If you go further west, you go up Furby Lane, next to the Ripon Community Hospital. On the north side, for the centre of the map shows the marketplace and the roads going off the marketplace. The main road being what was Horse Fair is now North Street, going towards North Bridge. And you can see Old Hallergate going off that, coming down towards Priest Lane. That's controlled development because the land there is higher than the land on either side of it, which was much more marshy originally, and it was easier to build on. And so that's where Ripon Centre started. We've got a stable base for the Minster, a stable base for the marketplace, and a stable base for the buildings to the west of Ripon. This page is an extract from the map, the gazetteer on the map, of a number of interesting buildings like the Minster Precinct, the Cemetery Chapel, St Wilfrid's Well, Palm Cross, and the Lady Kirk. This is a sort of level of interest that and this map shows most of those areas. St Wilfrid's Crypt in the middle of the Minster, the Palm Cross to the south side, St Wilfrid's Well to the east of the chapter house, and the east gate's there, the west gate's there, and the south gate right down at the bottom, just as it goes on to School Lane, because that's the site of the grammar school, almost certainly the site of the original grammar school that Wilfrid created in the 660s. So how did we start? What did we use as the base? Well, this is the base. It's a single shot of the 1892 Ordnance Survey map. And if I put the Jeffreys map of 1771 adjacent to it, you can see that the plan is pretty much the same from the medieval period into the late 18th century and into the late 19th century. If I go back and take that map out, I'm going to see the mill race. The river Skell is coming from the bottom of the map on the left-hand side. The main blue trace is the River Laver, and the River Laver and the Skell meet just below where the big weir is, and that's from that big weir there's a mill race going back into the city and through and over towards the Minster and on to the Skell, the other side. And that mill race had 7 mills in its heyday. It finally finished in 1892, the date of this map, when the weir at High Clough was demolished, and it was never rebuilt, sadly. Otherwise we'd have had the ability to generate electricity from turbo power using the mill race as a big turbine. Maps that we use to create the historical map. This one shows the St Mary Magdalene's precinct area with the chapel almost in the middle of the map. And to the left, on the other side of the road, is the hospital. Just showing 2 almshouses there, and to the east of the chapel is the master's house with his orchard. And this is the only map again that we've had to be able to give us an idea of the scale of the chapel and the hospital and the almshouses as was. This is a rather blurred view of Bongate Bridge. You can see it's well constructed, and it's from Humphrey's map of 1800. And combining the information that we've got on that Humphrey's map with what's known and what's shown on the 1892 map, we produced a series of screens of maps that outlined where the fords were, outlined where extant buildings are, outlined where extinct buildings are, and things like the remains of the west wall of the 12th century chapel shown in yellow on this map. We produced something approaching 50 of these maps to delimit the information for the cartographer for Giles Darks. And the next screen shows that area and the maps information being put onto a much more readable map than my attempts at providing the information for Giles Dark so he could produce these rather splendid maps. You can see in the middle of the screen the Walk Mill. That's probably the second mill that was produced in Ripon, and it was a fulling mill because Ripon was a very large producer of cloth, only behind York and Beverley in the 15th century, and gradually got overtaken by the now more recognised wool producers of Leeds and especially Bradford and the Calder Valley. We used a 1900 map here to try and work out the exact details of the changes in the area around Ripon Old Marketplace because Middle Street and the houses between Middle Street and Queen Street disappeared gradually over a period of time, except for Rayners, which you'll see down at the bottom of that row of houses, of buildings between Queen Street and Middle Street. And you'll see his building in the next slide, all by itself, quite dramatic. So there's Middle Street on the left, Queen Street on the right. And there's Rayner's draper's shop that he held out for 5 years before he finally gave in 1905, and his building was demolished to create a much wider Queen Street. And there's all the detail that is again shown on the gazetteer of the historical map of Ripon. So some interesting facts that came out. There were 5 race courses in Ripon, amazingly. And I'll try and give you a rundown of those 5 race courses. The first one was on Ripon Common, 1712, and that's the other side of the Ure from the one I'm showing you now, which is on Ure Bank. And that was famous because in 1723, John Hazelby's wife gave £20 as a prize for the women riders. And as far as we can tell, it's the first time in England that women raced horses. So Ripon has a first there, one of several firsts. That race course was disappeared in the 1820s when the area was it was on Ripon Common, so it was enclosed, and the race course moved over to the other side of the River Ure, hence this view here I'm showing you now, and stayed there for a number of years until it moved to Red Bank, which is on the west side of Ripon. And from West Bank, it moved finally to Boroughbridge Road, where it remains today. So that was in 1900. This is the Red Bank race course, and we've superimposed the outline of the South Camp, World War I camp, where up to 30,000 men received training before they went to the front. You can see on this screen the size of the High Clew Dam that failed in 1892, and you can see the mill race going through the city, running parallel with the Skell. So this race course was stopped working as a race course in 1900. And here's a view of the grandstand on the Red Bank race course. Well, late Victorian, maybe Edwardian map, photograph of the grandstand, and another one, a colour image of the same structure as the one you've seen. You see it's the grandstand because of the way the fenestration is. And this is a map photograph of the race course. Is known as Ripon racecourse, and as it is now, is known as the Garden Racecourse. And it says in the caption, opened in 1900 and voted best small racecourse in the north. It's a left-handed course rather than the usual right-handed way of riding around horse tracks. And there's a text panel to give you an idea of the depth and quality of the gazetteer of the historical map series. They all have a vast amount of information on the reverse of the map. And in this, we decided that because the race courses were so interesting that we do a text box. And you can see the £12 worth of plate. I do beg your pardon. I said 20, didn't I? Right. Enough about the map. A little now about Ripon and where it sits, and some history, a whole series of bits of information you're going to get now on Ripon. So where is it? Ripon is approximately, if I can find my pointer. Ripon is approximately where the red pointer is. And you can see the oldest rocks in this part of eastern North Yorkshire with the Carboniferous limestones of the Dales, and then the Millstone Grits, and then the coal measures down in Leeds. And then this striking through the middle of the map, the Permian Magnesian limestone series of rocks. And then Triassic to the east, sandstones, and the Jurassic to the northeast, sandstones, clays, all sorts of different stones. And then finally the Cretaceous chalk on the east. So you're going from the oldest rocks, 350 million Carboniferous limestone, up through to the Cretaceous of 50 million years ago. So that puts you in the position, and Ripon's on this strip of Permian Magnesian limestone. And there it is in greater detail. I'm not going to dwell on this other than you can see it's fairly complicated bedrock map. It's not easy to delimit it, but let me show you. Shero is on the Triassic sandstones here. Part of Shero is in the orange of the Roxby Formation. There's more gypsum in the red of the this formation here, and you can see that the way the land lies. I've got this taken this photograph from the Permian rocks up by Plumpton Hall on the outskirts of Studley Roger village, and it's looking east towards Ripon Cathedral, which sits on that fluvio-glacial terrace area that I was talking about earlier on, and beyond, also on the Triassic rocks, are the on the Triassic rocks are is the tower of Shero Church. So you go down to the river, up to the cathedral, down to the river, and then up to Shero. Permian Magnesian limestone has just come into a comment on the bottom of the slide on the right hand side. And the next view is, again, a foreshortened view, really quite magnificent, looking from Ripon Cathedral, beyond Ripon Cathedral, over towards Howe Hill, this building in the distance on this ridge. And this ridge is remains of a lateral moraine from the ice lobe that came down Wensleydale and deposited the sands, gravels and clays on this ridge, just like the ridge in Ripon that I've already talked to you about. And we'll go through the geology again, just so you get a very good impression of where the controls are. So the blue here is the Vale of York Formation, sands and gravels and muds. The pink is the fluvio-glacial terrace material. The browns is younger terrace material. To give you some ages, the Vale of York Formation is Devensian, so 100,000 years old, something like that, 80,000 years old. The fluvio-glacial material here is probably 50,000. The Luvum is within the last 10,000, and the river gravels are between 50 and 10,000 years. And you can see how Ripon has developed on these more stable areas of fluvio-glacial terracing rather than anywhere else. So there's lots of Ripon in the 20th century built down where the pointer's showing you the area. And the other control of development in Ripon is sinks and solution hollows caused by the removal of gypsum in beds underneath the city and the failing of the rocks above them, either dramatically to create very deep holes or gradually to create solution hollows. But you can see there, there's quite a lot of them, and they're very active. When my geological friends knew I was moving to Ripon, they said, well, you know, there's all problems about gypsum dissolution, hollows and sinkholes there, don't you? I said, yes, I do. But I've looked at the house down by the Skell and just below the cathedral, and it seems to be okay. And we were there 25 years and we never had any problems with subsidence or indeed flooding, which is another problem for parts of Ripon. Now, a few typical solution hollows as they appear. This one was taken 10 years ago on North Road. That's completely changed now. There's no pond of water. Corkscrew pits are still there, and Holgarth ponds are there for fishing. Here is a view of sinkholes to the north of Ripon. There's one that was completely filled with trees, another one there, and another one over here. And this is a close-up of this wall of this one. These sinkholes have been used as quarries. You can see on the LiDAR map here, sinkholes usually are, or hollows are round, cone-shaped, and here it's got square edges, and that's where the sandstones have been taken out. This one it was originally round, is now got a flat side there where the stone has been quarried. Not similarly on this one here. And I know from the research that we did on the cathedral that these Triassic sandstones from these quarries here were used to floor the 17th century new work in Ripon Cathedral. I'm just going over to the left-hand side. These are the corkscrew pits that appeared on my previous slide. And this is Hutton Conyers village. This is the Motte and Bailey Castle of Hutton Castle. These LiDAR maps really do show up the detail that other maps completely miss. And this is sadly what happens when ground is disturbed in Ripon. This is a house on Magdalens Close that had to be demolished. You can see why, because it was in a terrible state. 17th of February 2014, this building started to separate it into different parts. It was found out that a developer had been putting down boreholes and not capping the boreholes with sulfate resistant concrete to stop the water coming out, because the water in Ripon is under artesian pressure from the higher ground to the west, where the material, the water comes down dip through the sediments. And this is what happens to buildings when water is allowed to come back up under pressure. It dissolves the gypsum very much more quickly than if it's not flowing quickly. 2 years later, there was another failure. You can see the area in the middle of the screen looks darker and lower. That's because it is. If I show you, that's the 11th of November 2016, so 2 years later. If I show you this image, you can see the big hole. I was talking to the lady that was renting this house, and she said, I heard a noise and went out into the garden and put my foot down where there used to be a step, and it wasn't there. Fortunately, she grabbed hold of the post that you can see I'm highlighting here, which prevented her from falling down into this big hole. It's quite deep. We think this was also created by, you can see the water pipe there, where the Yorkshire Water Authority failed or didn't know about it. But whatever happened, the pipe failed. Water was going out of it into the ground below and dissolved the gypsum, and hence the failure. But the solution hollows are quite large in number in Ripon. I've just shown you stars on 3, asterisks on 3 of the solution hollows. But most of the green spaces that you can see, this one I'm highlighting here is Tower Road, and that's very noticeably a solution hollow with fallen down trees, etc. Nice green space. These solution hollows, anywhere we haven't got development effectively, is a solution hollow. And I've just seen some proposals to build on this area here for these all houses that government want to force on everybody in the country. This is another extract from the map to show you the main area of the Anglo-Saxon and medieval burial grounds. This one is All Hallows Hill. This is the area of the Lady Kirk. We know it's a two-cell structure, the Lady Kirk, but we don't know how big the burial ground extends. But it's likely to extend over St Marygate, which was inserted into the road structure in Ripon in the 12th century. And we've got another Anglo-Saxon burial ground on Ailsie Hill. This structure looks as though it's a spiral. Well, it is a spiral because the Edwardians built a walk so they could go take a walk and go up and have a look over the city. And that's why it's that shaped. Give you a little bit of history about the Minster. You'll see that Eata had Cuthbert as a guest, and when Wilfrid returned from Rome, he was made Bishop of Ripon. He took over the Scots monastery and established a school and built a stone church dedicated to in 672. He died in Ripon in 709, and the settlement developed from that place because the St Wilfrid's Shrine was an important place for pilgrims and remained so for many centuries. There's the crypt as it is today, and I'll try and give you a run through the script so you can see what it's like. The name Ripon derives from the English Eripi, an Anglian tribe. One branch founded Repton, the town of the Eripi in Derbyshire, and the image on the left is the 720 crypt in the church in Repton. And it was where the great Danish army overwintered in 873, 874, before settling in Northumbria, Midlands and East Anglia to create Danelaw. Ripon Cathedral's crypt is the oldest part of any cathedral in England. These are the steps down to the crypt. To get to the bottom of there, you turn left and then right. Down this passageway, you get to the bottom of the passageway, you turn left into the crypt itself. And here in the niche above the altar table is an alabaster tablet. This one has been repainted in what are dubious colours, to be honest, because they're not as you would expect them in a 14th century. About 1350, this tablet. One of 4 remaining in Ripon. One time the minster had at least 7 altar pieces, altar reredos, and between 5 and 7 tablets, making each reredos. Here's a view of the Swansea altar piece that's in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and these are elements of that, where there's Resurrection, which is the version that we've got in Ripon, only not as good as the Resurrection here, which is from the V&A. The most beautiful one is this Betrayal one in the middle, which was in Chris Beetle's gallery in 2009. I think it was something like 30,000, but really quite magnificent alabasters, mainly all destroyed. The 4 left in Ripon were hidden under slabs, floor slabs. Well, Ripon in the 14th and 15th centuries was famous for its cloth. It also famous for producing knitted hats. I don't think they're quite, in fact, I'm not quite sure what's happening in this image, but they're all wearing woolen hats, just like this one. I'm going to show you somebody very thoughtfully wearing a hat. The first reference to cap knitters in England appears in Ripon in 1456. And the tradition continues because in the Ripon Community Poppy Project in 2014 produced 55,000 knitted poppies that was taken all over the city, covered railings, or whatever could be covered was covered with poppies, woolen poppies that are used every year now for remembrance. The whole of the weeks leading up to Remembrance Sunday, the city gets bedecked with poppies, and this knitted tank was done for the 80th anniversary of D-Day in June of last year. But not just the tank, the soldiers were knitted as well. I mean, that's quite remarkable that it's done by a team of knitters, and I think they did 3 of these soldiers. The community poppy project has done very well recently, because here you see the 2 leading lights of it, Hazel Barker on the left, Stuart Martin on the left, receiving the King's Award for voluntary service from Mrs. Joe Rottner, the Lord Lieutenant. And looking on is Rick Compton, Deputy Lord Lieutenant, who owns Newby Hall. Well-deserved award from the King, who is a freeman of the city of Ripon. I think this is the last piece of the historical map of Ripon that I'm going to show you, and the price is £11.99. And how does all these sinkholes and the like affect people in Ripon? Well, we think it affected this man here, Lewis Carroll. He would see the big hole by Ripon railway station on his many travels around on the railways. And this is a cross-section of Ripon effectively with the bed, so I can talk about the formation of sinkholes and hollows. You can see the caves and cavities and pipes. This is a pipe that's gone all the way through. So there's been gypsum here, it's been dissolved, and land has collapsed above it to produce a pipe. So this is a limestone. In the southwest Fountains Abbey area, water percolates into it and it comes down dip to Ripon. So if there are any boreholes put through the rocks here, the water comes back under pressure, and the borehole has to be capped with sulfate resistant concrete, otherwise it gets blown up and water comes out under pressure and it dissolves the gypsum even more. Here the gypsum has been dissolved and have formed caves and cavities within the bed, within the 2 beds. So there are 2 beds under Ripon. And you can see that the glacial till has covered a lot of the potential problem areas. Alluvium and river terraces also cover the solid geology. I hope that explains what happens. The land fails and the land above sinks, creating a hollow. And if there's a sandstone above it, it falls dramatically, creating a very neat hole, just like the ones I've just shown you. So what else influenced the young Lewis Carroll? His father was a canon for 3 months of the year in Ripon Minster, as it was then. Now it had become the cathedral, I beg your pardon, Ripon Cathedral. And he was there for 3 months for confirmation classes, basically, taking students through confirmation. And he would see on a regular basis the griffin chasing the rabbit down a hole, which is under the mayor's seat in the choir of the cathedral, a seat I know well. And you would find Blemiers, that's men with no heads. You can find other references to items from Alice in Wonderland, but his influence would be for those in the countryside as well as the cathedral choir with its wonderful misericords, 1584. Over the period that he was writing, his father stayed at the Old Hall, which was the original residence for canons, and then the new residence was built, probably obliterating the two prebendary houses of Givendale and Sharrow. But that residence was demolished in the 1960s. So we don't have any records of what was here beforehand or after. It's now built on as Cathedral Close in modern housing in the 70s. We have some very interesting and decorative images of some of the buildings. There's the late 19th century or mid 19th century St Mary Magdalene's Chapel and almshouses. You see the almshouses on the other side of the road on the left here. And there's the chapel, no roof on it. It was being used to house chickens or as a store, one or both, I think, if I remember rightly. And a house built on the end of the chapel, close up by it. And this is the chapel today, with free space all the way around. This building at the back here is just about to go. Is about to be taken down and redeveloped further away from the edge of the chapel, the east end of the chapel wall. St John's, I can only show you the remains of the wall, the west wall of the chapel, the original chapel, and this is the site of it. We know that because that's where the wall still stands. And down at the bottom here, the almshouses. And this is the present St John's Chapel of 1868 and the present almshouses of 1878. This is the infamous, I suppose, John Hazelby, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer and developed the South Sea Company, whose shares dramatically failed, and he was castigated and put in the Tower of London. I think he's the only MP that's ever been put in the Tower of London. It didn't do him any harm because he came out and returned to Ripon and commenced the continuation of the wonderful water garden at Studley Royal, of which he is famous for. Here's this magnificent aerial view of the water garden, and you can see the shape. This is the Skull Gorge, and you can see that the gorge is a lot wider than the river is today. Even the river is about the size of the canal that was created. And this is the Half Moon Pond, Tent Hill here. This is the visitor centre entrance off the Pateley Bridge Road. And this is the Studley Park, part of the water garden. Inscribed as a World Heritage Site for the Studley Royal Water Garden and Fountains Abbey. Fountains Abbey effectively was an eye catcher at the end of the land that was owned by John Hazelby. His son William bought the abbey and added it to the, effectively become part of the water garden. Here you get an idea of the Skell Gorge. So what's Ripon famous for? Well, a hornblower, charter horn and spurs. The town book of 1598 records what a hornblower did and the other jobs that were held. The hornblower was required to blow to set the watch, i.e. start the curfew at 9 o'clock, and to blow 4 times, one at each corner of the obelisk in the middle of the, or the cross, market cross as it was in 1598. And to blow it 4 times, one at each of the corner of the cross, and then to go and find the mayor either outside his residence and blow 3 times, or for wherever the mayor was within the town as it was then, or within the city as it is now, and to blow 3 times again and tell the mayor that the watch is set. And the hornblower will come and find you wherever you are. If you're in a concert, or the only time I didn't have a hornblower blowing was when I was in the cinema. But everywhere else, all the other entertainment venues in Ripon, especially the cathedral, the hornblower would come in and blow 3 blasts of his horn or her blasts, or her horn, to show that the watch was set. And the watch was set because the wakeman originally, and then the mayor from 1604, were liable to replace what was stolen, or the value of what was stolen, from properties that paid to have the bylaw graves look after their properties, basically. So it was an insurance scheme. 2d for a door, so it was 2d for a front door, 2d for a back door, so 4d a year was quite a lot of money then. But you got an insurance of nobody attempting to rob you, or if they were attempting to rob you, they'd got caught by the bylaw graves. There were four bylaw graves, 4 policemen, in other words. And the horn is blown as various types of horn. You see that very large ox horn that is being blown by the Edwardian gentleman. The 2 gentlemen on the right. This one is the bellman, who opens the market at 11 o'clock every Thursday by ringing the bell. And the other one is the sergeant at mace, who carries the horn and the mace on special occasions in the city. Here's the horn being used at the obelisk. There's the logo of Ripon. 2004, we got some money from Heritage Lottery to conserve the horn and the baldricks. There are 3 baldricks. One you see there, they're covered by silver badges of the various mayors. The oldest one is 1453. Several of the early ones were reused, typical Yorkshire. So you get one mayor on one side, and then presumably a mayor decided he didn't want to buy a silver badge, so he used one of the other badges that already existed and put his details on the reverse. The gentleman, this is the chief conservator of York Archaeological Trust. That's me in my younger days. That's the late Richard Hall, who was the archaeologist. And we've got on the right hand side Jim, the sergeant at mace, and John, an ex-mayor. And there's the famous charter horn, which is supposed to have been given by Alfred the Great. I think the confusion is that Alfrith of Northumberland gave 40 hides of land to create the liberty of Ripon. And I think that's been confused with Alfred the Great giving charter as a horn as the charter. We know that the horn, this particular horned cattle, wasn't introduced until the 15th century, so this particular horn can't be any longer than 15th century in date. But we know that the Wakeman had a horn blower which was used in 1400, so that's not unreasonable to have a 15th century horn. So Christmas Day in 2005 was the first time in 400 years that the horn hadn't been paraded in front of the citizens. That was because it was being conserved in York Archaeological Trust. You might recognise the mayor on the left hand of the table. That's the sergeant at mace with his shiny baldric. Every year, nearest time to the 1st of August, is St Wilfrid's procession. Which is to commemorate the life of St Wilfrid, and there he is on his horse. He went to Rome 3 times. Miraculously, we're talking about the 7th century, 8th century rather. There's the marketplace in 1880 with the obelisk, the oldest freestanding obelisk in the country. The railways came in 1849. They arrived in 1849 and they departed in 1969, sadly, following the review by the chairman of ICI, Lord Beeching. By the time that the railways arrived, Ripon was an industrial city with several breweries, several malt kilns, factories producing metal goods, wool mongering, quite a lot of industry. And in 1914, 1915, it had the Ripon Army Camp, north and south camps. You see the outline of the city. This is the city as it was in 1914. And you can see the extent of the army camp. This is the main railway service in it, so the army camp came all the way out here and north to take in 30,000 men. This shows you the detail of the south camp. You can see the railway streaking through. This is the skull here. Big area covered. And this is soldiers being demobbed in the YMCA hut that was built next to the railway station. So what about the things that people can come to Ripon to see today? Well, there are 3 country houses of great note. Markenfield Hall was probably the best small moated manor house in the country. Norton Conyers, and the magnificent Newby Hall, the Robert Adam House, which has magnificent gardens as well. And finally, this is Studley Royal Water Garden, one of the Ripon attractions that enjoy over 1 million day visitors every year. That's not just Studley Royal and the country houses. There's also the garden, Himalayan Garden and Sculpture Park at Grawthorpe, Lightwater Valley Entertainment Park, Ripon Cathedral, Ripon Museums, and of course the racecourse we've already mentioned. That people come to Ripon for lots of things. They come to enjoy the surroundings, the historic surroundings, and to enjoy good food and beer. And I commend a visit to Ripon to you, and I hope you've enjoyed my little talk through the city and how it's worked over the centuries, over the last, I suppose, 1400 years. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mick. I'm going to invite Sarah, perhaps to say a word or two, perhaps a question even.
Yes, thank you, Mick, for such a sort of wide-ranging talk around Ripon, as well as the making of the map as well. I think my question relates to the making of the map, and it's about surprises, and it's really whether there were any surprises, whether you discovered things that you didn't know, either in the making of the map or perhaps in people's reaction to it, because I know you're going to go on to produce an atlas, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. Well, I suppose the things I've tried to outline the things that we found. The 5 race courses was a surprise. It shouldn't be, because horses have been important in Ripon from the 14th century, where horse fair, which is what North Road is now called, was important. There were 2 horse fairs a year in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. And I gather from reading about horse racing and horse dealing through the centuries, Ripon was noted because horses were often brought here, pinched from somebody and told a Ripon fair, which is perhaps not a very good recommendation, but that's what was happening, as I understand it. So there's quite a lot on the horse racing side that was new. The All Hallows Church, everybody assumed, and it's tradition that St Wilfrid had All Hallows Church built. Well, clearly he didn't, because there's no physical record of a church on All Hallow Gate at all, which was a surprise, because we followed tradition, although several myths have been burst.
Yes.
Several myths need further bursting. But we have at least got through the fact that the Ripon horn wasn't a charter horn given by Alfred the Great, because he was busy doing other things in 886, when he's supposed to have been giving horns to Ripon.
Yes, that's true.
I mentioned the great Danish army overwintering in Repton, and they went and settled, and the whole of this area was very much under Danish control in 886. But it's tradition, and the horn blowers all tell that story of King Alfred the Great giving the charter horn to Ripon. But on the panels, information panels in the marketplace, they have the truth.
Thank you.
Sorry, Sarah, go on.
I can see other questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand back to David to let them get in. Thank you.
Okay.
So much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions. One is, could you say something about the prebendal houses in Ripon? What was their purpose? Have you got
I think I pointed out some of the prebend houses. There were 7 of them, and they were the homes of the canons, effectively. The prebend was the rent or the toll for the canons in their particular areas of the area around Ripon, because they were mainly from the outskirts rather than from Ripon itself. But that's what the prebend houses were. There's quite a lot of information on the prebends. And I'm hoping that we're going to do some research on them, because a lot of prebends were very well educated and well respected professional people who didn't necessarily come to Ripon but took the benefits of the prebends.
Thank you very much. I was wondering a little bit about the ordinary buildings. You guess wonder why. And did you come across any that were particularly interesting or particularly notable?
Well, I mean, there are a number of them that are. I mean, the 19th century and the 18th century up to a point provided a new skin for most of the housing in Ripon. Celia Fiennes talked about it being a stone town with thatched roofs, which it almost certainly was when she was about. But afterwards, the houses got a new facade of brick because it was fashionable, or stuccoed because it was fashionable. And we lost a lot. Well, we haven't lost them. They're still there. The houses are still there. They just got brick covers, and it's not very apparent until you go inside and have a look round, and you can see that it's a medieval building. Virtually the whole of Kirkgate is like that.
Good.
If that's answered your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it does very much. One other thought is that, has there been a great fire? It always strikes me that medieval towns seem to manage to have a fire. No. Then
there's no record of a great fire. There's no record of any fires at all.
Right. Okay.
So brick chimneys obviously worked, didn't they?
Clearly. Mick, I'd like to thank you very much for that talk. It was very interesting, and we're delighted that they've produced this map. And I understand, looking forward to an atlas now. So that is something to look forward to, because I think these atlases are a very successful way of which the Historic Towns Trust can illustrate our history and our lives. And you've illustrated our history, the history of Ripon, very much. And I'm looking forward to my visit there next time.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me know when you're coming, David, and we'll
thank you very much.
We'll have a look at some houses, some normal houses rather than the special buildings, I suppose I've been talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll just before I close the meeting, I'll just mention our next talk. The BALH, in conjunction with the Historic Towns Trust, we have a talk on Chester in about a month's time. It's on the 29th of April, and that is again on Zoom at 7 p.m. And then in May we have the AGM of the British Association for Local History. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I hope you've enjoyed seeing all the work that has gone into it, and I encourage you to go to Ripon, and I encourage you to buy the product as well. So thank you very much to Mick, and thank you very much to all the contributors, and a very good evening to you. Goodbye.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye.